Hi, great to see you.
Hey,
Do you
buddy.
want to just introduce yourself a little bit for everybody? Tell them about yourself.
Of course. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Thanks, Emma. I'm Smriti Patel, VP of Engineering at Apollo. I joined Apollo about 3 weeks ago, so ramping up at Apollo. Apollo helps app developers uh, help the world by creating apps which are performant, which are efficient at much lower TCO. Before Apollo, I was at Stripe for 5 years, where I built cloud efficiency and latency performance teams, and then went on to lead the data infrastructure teams, which supported uh, the big data infrastructure, the streaming infrastructure, and all the tooling abstractions, including some critical data products for Stripe's mission critical business. And over my career so far, I've been leading teams for about 10 to 15 years now. It's been a fun, exciting journey. And the one thing that I've learned across this period is it comes down to people. And that's why I'm here.
Great, thank you. And just let everybody know we will take questions as we go. So by all means, pop your questions in, and I'll feed them to Smriti as we go. Let's kick off with that theme then. That idea of, I guess you're serving two masters, aren't you? When you're especially in that VP of engineering role, and you're bridging that gap between your leadership team, your C-suite even, and the engineering team that you're working with. How do you strike that balance then? Who's your first loyalty to, and how do you manage that?
Oh, Emma, that's such a fun question, and that definitely keeps me up at night to see if that tension and the healthy tension is something I'm walking effectively. Uh, so let me tell you a story. I got into management and leadership over a decade ago, and this was a time when I was at VMware. VMware had two career paths: the IC track and the management track, and I was at that cusp of, do I become a staff engineer or a manager? And I thought I'd have a lot of agency and autonomy and authority to drive the then product strategy. And I decided to go into management to lead our people teams. And looking back, I realized I'd gone into management for the wrong reasons, perhaps. But over time, I realized that I was staying there for the right reasons, which is the people, seeing people grow. Um, and that has basically helped me well over the years. My focus has been a lot about how do I be that bridge between leading business success and business outcomes for our users. This is through what are we shipping, what are we building, what problems are we solving, and why, and tying that business success down to leading teams and groups of teams to say, are we functioning healthy in an environment by creating the right culture of psychological safety, radical candor, and growth mindset? So, how are individuals on teams and groups of teams working effectively? Down to understanding individual intrinsic motivation at the atomic level, at the IC level or the manager level. What makes people tick? How do you know what they're excited about, what they're frustrated about? And so, to me, managing that tug between managing up or managing down and managing across comes down to how effectively am I threading that needle between the business outcomes for users and the business, to creating a healthy collaborative environment in which my own teams can operate, but also I leaning into my first team of different peers, be it product, be it sales, be it marketing, and then tying it down to, do we have the right talent? Do we have the right folks? Are they excited? Are they stretching themselves? So, being that bridge between business outcomes to team velocity down to individual intrinsic motivation is me. And that comes down to how you're managing up, managing across, and managing down.
I find it really interesting you say that. I guess everything you described then sounds very mature and a very definitely from experience of having lived through that and grown through that, shall we say. Um, One of the phrases I think you used early on just then was that maybe you got into management for the wrong reasons. And I'm just wondering how long that has taken you to learn that. That sounds like a very mature attitude
That's
to be in that.
absolutely. And I think looking back, hindsight's 2020. So what sounds great in theory comes from 15 years of mistakes made, lessons learned, and hopes and dreams. So absolutely didn't get it right on the take one or two. In terms of how long it's taken, I think it has been all about working with people at an individual level, plus ensuring that you have the right stakeholders. Like early on, when I was leading a quality engineering team back at VMware, our closest stakeholders were some of the developer teams who would build code and then have my team validate if what we had done was right. VMware back then was following a waterfall model of releasing enterprise software once every 2 years. And so the typical operational model was, the code complete stage, and then the QE team would come in. And giving you a very concrete example there was this time where we were asked to ship multiple releases within a year, and it took me to understand what does debugging engineering velocity look like. How can we shrink the overall release cycle, for example? And this is where thinking in systems has helped me very well. It's this concept by Donella Meadows, which is nothing is broken or wrong in isolation. So understand the elements, how they interconnect, and what is the function or purpose of the system. And so if I take this example where I evaluate that, hey, our enterprise release is 2 years long and it is waterfall, what are things that are getting in the way? And as manager of the automation team, one thing that I realized was a lot of the problems we were testing and finding much later in the release could actually be shifted left. So, working with my developer manager counterpart, understanding what concerns they faced, what challenges they faced, what lack of tooling they had, we worked together with my developer manager counterpart and my product manager to say, hey, what did we need to build? What did we need to ship? And why? What was the timeline we were working on? And what were challenges along the way that my team could be the best support? And what we actually enabled was to front load a lot of those integration issues much earlier in the release, working very closely with the developer team. And that enabled us actually, instead of shipping one release every 2 years, to shipping two releases within 1 year. But it happened due to very close interaction with the dev manager counterpart, the product manager, and we had stumbled along the way, but coming together as a healthy collaborative environment, and then leading with empathy to say, like, okay,
Mhm.
it's not just that A is wrong or B is wrong. It's about how do we work together to assess a mutually correct and a mutually optimal outcome for our users, enabled us to drive the right results.
Mm. And that was, sorry, just giving a check back for everybody in the audience too. You're talking about systems thinking by Donella Meadows, didn't you say?
Done.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
excellent.
that's the one.
I'm sure there's an awful lot of people that it will resonate with and recognize that. I know just from speaking with other members in CTO Craft that a lot of people find themselves at that fork in the road of, okay, do I go down a management and leadership track? Do I want to stay technical? How long can you keep a foot in both camps as you try and walk that line and spin it out and hedge your bets as long as you possibly can? What's your thoughts on that age old question of staying technical as you go further up into the leadership team as well?
Yeah, so that's another good question. For me, the amount of technicality depends a lot on your ability to operate at the right zoom factor. I do not day to day write code. I have not written code, or at least been in the critical path of writing code, for about a decade. Having said that, it starts with, what is the composition of your team? What does your team need at a given point in time? What is your business landscape? What does the business need? For example, a VP of engineering at a 2,000 person engineering company is going to be very different or face very different challenges than the VP of a 30-person team or a 300-person team. So, evaluating what is the scale and shape of your organization, and to see what is the skill set that you have and that you lack. You want to play to your best strengths, but a big part of leadership is knowing what are your gaps in your understanding, and then go hire the best brilliant minds to complement for those gaps that you might have. So a big part is, how are you building the right team to lean on, giving them the agency, the autonomy to be able to effect the right decisions with the right guardrails in place. So you have to have the best talent in house, which has got diverse complementary skill set. So what is the team that you're building is step zero. Actually, step zero is how self aware you are. Then, step one is, do you have the right team to sort of supplement for the gaps that you might have or that the team itself has? But the second bit then is, how are you delegating that authority and that safe space for people to take risks, to fail, but also to succeed and elevate their ambitions? And here's where a big part of leadership is being open, transparent, and vulnerable at times to say, hey, you don't have to have all the decisions, you don't have to have the right answers, but you absolutely have to know whom to lean on to enable the right conversations. And so, if you are representing your group, it is on you to be able to communicate the complexities, the challenges that your group face. So, in terms of how technical do you need to be, I'd say evaluate the business need that the group has, evaluate the talent that you have in house or the gaps you have. And there are times you might need to flex into those gaps, not on the day to day, but you have to know when to operate at that breadth versus when do you have to go deep. Like, for example, there might be a big incident which came in, and the team might need you to sort of step in just to ask the right questions. You don't have to have the answers again, but to be able to zoom in to say, hey, this smells funny, what are we doing about that? And so I personally keep my technical skills up to speed with what's going on latest in technology, reading the right books, learning from the right peers. But in terms of the day to day, knowing whom to lean on and having the ability to flex and zoom in or zoom out based on the audience or the business need is what it comes down to, I've learned.
Okay, and how does that balance, I guess, with expectations of the leadership team, the C-suite, your peers around you? I have plenty. Obviously, we all know people where you're okay. You've got a CTO title or a VP of engineering title, so you're expected to know all about the technology, and you're going to be the more technical person in that group as well. And like you say, you don't always have the answers, but you've got the right team around you that do have the answers. And I guess first and foremost, it's a people issue, isn't it? And how you lead that team. But there's still an expectation that you're going to be the most technical person in the room, in that boardroom, in that C-suite, in those leadership meetings. How does that work out for you?
That comes down to, at the heart of it, a career development philosophy that I have, which is explore, align, and reinforce. I call it the EAR framework. And what I mean by that is, at the heart of it is being aligned with your leadership, with your stakeholders, and people that you are accountable to in terms of your leadership team. And so sitting down and exploring, what does the business need, what are the goals for 2023, for example, as we are coming at the end of the year, being aligned on what your goals are is the most fundamental thing that you can do to get right. And of course, you have to make micro adjustments as that goes along, but at the very heart of it is, how aligned are you with your key leadership team? Like, if you're reporting into the CEO, or if you have a partner in sales and revenue, the thing to note is, you may be a functional lead, you may lead engineering, for example, or you may lead marketing or sales or product. You may be a functional lead, but to begin with, you are a business leader helping grow the business in service of the users you've identified. So, how do you ensure you've got the right goals for the right business outcomes? What is your business strategy? What is your product strategy? And then, what should the technical strategy be in service of those goals? So, aligning on the why and the North Star in terms of what does great look like, what does good look like, is at the heart of it. And once you've established that, then the micro tactical aspects are, do you then have the team? Are you the one who's actually going in to make those changes? Versus, do you then go hire for the right folks on the team? And there are times, like if you think about our current macroeconomic headwinds, you might not have bandwidth to hire new people like you previously did. In those cases, what is step zero? What does the team need? What does the business need? Can you flex into that? If not, what is plan B? So it comes down to that exploring that alignment of what your goals are going to be. And that varies whether you want to be at a quarterly cadence, at a half cadence, or an annual cadence. And the second step then is you're aligning in terms of what are concrete tasks you could take on in service of those goals. And you have to have that expectation setting, which is what are the right priorities. You might, for example, realize that the key priority going into the next year is ensuring you've got the right budget and capital allocation strategy between your headcount, your operational expenses. Do you grow your business, or do you improve your operational efficiency? Do you improve your leadership and up level your managers into how you need them to operate? Or do you redefine how you've been doing your hiring and compensation? So there could be a lot of problems to solve, and that alignment stage basically is about what are the key problems that you want to solve, and then having that alignment that yes, these priorities are indeed the right priorities to go after. And the last is the reinforce bit, which is you have those regular sit downs and checkpoints of your goals to say, hey, are we meeting the right outcomes? And at that stage, when you're operating as an executive, it is not about the output you deliver so much as the outcomes. It's not the what you did, but what you enabled, what you unlocked. How are you the force multiplier for compounding durable value to your business, to your users, to your stakeholders? That's what it comes down to.
Okay. We've got a very juicy question from the audience, and I'm
All
definitely sensing some trauma from Howell here. It says, in some
right.
environments, like asking for a friend, in some environments, your first team can be so dysfunctional that you don't really believe in the outcomes or the goals that you have to aim for. So how do you handle that when you have to lead your organization towards a goal that you don't actually agree with? There's definitely a story behind that, and I would
Oh,
love to be able to get it. We'll pick that one up offline, probably.
I know. Firstly, lots of hugs. It's definitely hard to operate as an executive in an environment where the goals are not aligned, right? To, I- and when faced with such an environment, I think the first thing that I would do perhaps is I'm assuming the person's already tried working with the stakeholders, working with that first team, and realized that that isn't working out. The next then is who's the lowest common denominator across the set of folks that you can perhaps take the problem to. And this is where the intent is what you want to clarify in where you yourself stand, which is, get off the dance floor, get onto the balcony. What does good look like for the users or for the business? Having the ability to frame it in that good strategy, bad strategy, like what is the diagnosis, what is the current state? If the current state is like, hey, if these stakeholders, we are not aligned on the goals, how do you frame it such that if you had 5 to 10 minutes of that person's time, whoever your lowest common denominator is, you can go pitch the problem to say, hey, here's what we are facing, and here's the problem with that. But you also don't want to sound as someone who's just whining about the problem, and so have A or B kind of solutions in place to say, how can you enlist a few problems or few solutions to get out of the current state. And so, step zero, see if you can find an ally to go to, or someone who has the authority to effect the change in terms of the problem that you are seeing. If you're seeing this problem, you're probably not the only one who's seeing the problem. There are others, your engineering leads or your senior technical engineers, who are also seeing the effect of this dysfunctional state. And so, how do you find some of those allies who can also bubble up this problem such that multiple folks are talking about it? And how do you then engage in a healthy conversation and dialogue with someone who does have the authority to effect the change? And if you've tried all of that, if you've tried finding the right person, and you haven't been able to move the needle, the question then is, how much can you shield your team while these conversations are happening? Because you also want to ensure that you're not seeing team disengagement, you're not seeing attrition, and that people are not seeing the thrash as a result of this. So how much of that shit umbrella can you be while you are figuring out this with your leadership team? And at the end of it, if you've tried it all and it doesn't work, I would say run and run fast for the hills, in terms of finding an environment where it does work. Because at the heart of it, look, as an executive, it is your responsibility, and you are the one accountable to effect change. You have more power than you realize. You have more influence than you realize. And so, what does exercising that look like? How are you then having a seat at the right tables to bring up some of these problems. And that goes to the meta point, which is how much clout and trust have you yourself established, that if you show up to say, hey, here's the problem, we got to do something about it, people are going to say, all right, let's take notice. So I think the meta thread here is how much trust and social capital have you built out, that if you were to bring up this problem, people would take notice. And if you think that in spite of that, you haven't seen change, then I would say it's perhaps time for a new environment.
It's starting to sound like Frankie's talk as well. I just want to pull up on that as well, because there's I think there's something in there about self-care as well, right? And then you shouldn't underestimate how hard it is to be, especially in that kind of VP of engineering role where you have a peer group who are in that same kind of that layer of management and leadership, and you've got the C-suite above you with their own priorities and the wider business priorities, and you've got a team looking to you as well. You pulled in so many different directions and managing messages and balance and protecting people up and down and across. So it's very easy to get lost in the middle of all that somewhere. And especially, I think one of the points that we were talking about before as well, when we were chatting about this, was, just the times at the minute. There's layoffs everywhere. There's a pressure on everybody. There's got to be something in there about how you take care of yourself in the middle of all that as well.
Absolutely, Emma. You've really brought up a very important point, which is, as executives, as VPs, as CTOs, to this entire audience, I'd say you are not alone. It is a very stressful environment. It can be very lonely. You can feel very alone. But know that the most important thing you could do is, at the heart of it, find community, find people that you can go to. I think Lara Hogan calls it the manager Voltron, which is find a set of other peers in the industry that we can be with for each other, because you might not have a chance to find that within the companies that you are at. So find a community, find a support system. But absolutely, Emma, to your point, put your own oxygen mask on, because if you are having a bad day and you show up, people read a lot into how you are showing up. Even if you're not having problems associated with the people in the Zoom call, they're like, okay, what else is happening? Is the other shoe gonna fall? So if you're having a bad day, you absolutely have to have the ability to manage it. And if you think you cannot show up well for your team, for your people on any given day, take the time where you can do that breathing exercise, give yourself the space, because it is absolutely important to show up as the leader, walk the talk. People read and see you and are looking up to you. You are in that spotlight. And to ensure that you've taken good care of yourself, have those self reflective time and space. It gets very hard to do that, but it is very crucial to ensure you're making that time and space for yourself, to know what is your pulse. In fact, one of the first exercises I do every day is, how do I feel? How do I really, really feel? What's working well? What's not? What are my priorities? And if I'm not feeling well, I have to ask myself, what are my thoughts, behaviors, patterns that I can manage? And if it is something I can take care of within, before I start my work day, I deal with it. But if I can't, then I do have to find my avenues to ensure that I show up well for the people and the team. So putting your own
Perfect.
oxygen mask on, absolutely crucial.
That seems like a very positive note to finish on, because we are out of time anyway. Thank you very much, Smruti. I shall let you crack on with your day. Thank you.